Good day, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. You have been so loyal in watching us every Tuesday on LinkedIn Live at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, I want to send you all a very warm welcome and thank you for all my guests for appearing today. Have you ever wondered why women of color or diverse backgrounds code switch? A recent article I read in the Harvard Business Review stated code switching involves adjusting one style of speech, appearance, behavior, and expression in ways that will optimize the comfort of others in exchange for fair treatment, quality service, and employment opportunities. You might be wondering what this has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. This excerpt illustrates the importance of assessing your values. Code switching can have its repercussions. It's very important to evaluate your work goals and values. Are you ambitious? Do you seek advancement no matter what the cost? Is it important for you to be your authentic self regardless of the work environment? Are you more willing to code switch for short-term gains? My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate. And for a living, I help thought-provoking leaders and business owners implement DEI plans in their workplace. And if you tune in, not only will you have better insight of our experiences, it will allow room for self-reflection. In our previous episode, we shared how we code switched, when we did it, and how it helped or hurt us. My personal share, the more I evaluated who I was, the more exhausting I found the continuous code switching to be. So my question to you, have you ever code switched? Kachi is the Senior Talent Acquisition Manager at Yumly, a subsidiary of Whirlpool. Prior to Yumly, she ran Recruiting Like a Boss, helping early stage startups and the professionals they depend on to grow. She is also a highly praised career coach with a background in political science and law, earning a bachelor's degree from the University of Notre Dame in 2006 before continuing to law school. Kachi, welcome. You're on mute.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
I definitely have code switched. I have grown up in predominantly non-Black spaces. So, for me, my first code switching was when I actually went away to an international boarding school and wasn't the only Black person, and I needed to not become, I didn't want to be the whitewashed Americanized Oreo that I had been called when I would encounter other groups like who looked like me in high school. So for me, it was an opportunity to reinvent myself as the Black girl I wanted to be. So that was actually my first experience with code switching, was learning slang. Back in the day, we called it Ebonics. Now it's Black Vernacular English. And so I have an interesting relationship with code switching, and having to do it in many different spaces. And I think I was one of those Black women. I think a lot of us who grew up in mostly white spaces. My sister was lucky enough to actually go to an HBCU, but it was a radicalization almost of my language to stop looking at it as slang or ebonics and just look at it the same way we would look at Southern white language, right? Like, I remember in college, someone had once said, like, bless your heart. And I was like, thank you. And so I was like, that's not what that means. That's not what she means by that. And so, even then, it's just like, I kind of realized that it's, like the code, really, sometimes you're not sure what you're speaking. if you're growing up in a different type of environment, I didn't know what was the code, what was my link. So there was a lot of confusion just for me that I think even today at work, I still kind of am confused about and trying to figure out sometimes. And then also being a Black person in predominantly white spaces, I was acutely aware of how much I didn't want to be a caricature of the Black woman. You know what I mean? Like, I have, white friends, when I bring them into predominantly white spaces, I get uncomfortable when they'll be like, "Oh, girl," and da da da. I'm like, no, turn it down. Like, you can do that with me, teasy, teasy. But I felt uncomfortable, being with that white girl who was trying to fit in. And it was just, awkward. So I've seen code switching in a lot of spaces. So I have a very conflicting relationship with it.
You have a conflicting relationship. So you do code switch then in those
Oh,
different
yes.
spaces. You do.
But I
And
don't
so
know if it's, yeah, but I don't know what's code switching now. Am I code switching when I'm with my African family and I get on the Nigerian accent, like, and I'm sucking my teeth a little extra? Is that code switching? Or I grew up not allowed to speak slang at home. My dad was very Nigerian. He said, you're not going to be one of those ghetto whatever's out there. You will speak proper English. So when I'm at work and I go real extra with the American talk, is that code switching? I don't even know when I'm code switching, but I just know I change myself from my environment a lot.
do you find it to be exhausting though? You said you're doing it a lot, so that's throughout the day. When do you find you are your authentic self?
Yeah, I think it's when I guess it's when I'm not thinking about it. When I'm not saying talk like this or use this type of language or use your hands like this or use your hands less. When I'm not worried about how I present or how I'm going to be received by the other side, that's authentic. But in that same case, I might use an African phrase and my mom's from New York, Harlem, so we got all kinds of expressions and things. Or I might bring some of that in. I might bring in some, like, we call it Becky language. But when I'm not thinking about it, it all comes out. So that's when I'm comfortable.
Right, that's when you're authentic, really.
Hmm.
So would you say that's when you're not switching? Because switching is going from speaking one way into another. So when you're yourself and you said it all comes out, do you feel that that encompasses Kachi as a whole person?
Yeah, like, think of it this way. You have a dinner plate, right? And you have your protein, you've got your starches, you've got your greens, and you're going to take a bite of this or a bite of that. For me, it's like I'm the salad. Like, just put it all in together, mix it all up. Maybe you're getting a little lettuce here, you're getting some carrots over there. And the whole experience, like, if you took something out, it would be less complete, right? So I think for me, when I'm eating salad, that's when I'm my authentic self.
That's when your authentic self. That's very interesting. Well, the next person on our panel is Rachel, like my name, Sylvain Spence. She's a dynamic change agent and multidisciplinary professional speaker and life strategist. Her pursuits share a common thread to her desire to ignite, uplift, and inspire all to the potential of a great life. Rachel is the founder. It sounds so strange to say my name introducing somebody else. So, Rachel, she's the founder of Our Motivation, a life strategy and consulting company. Rachel strongly believes that the journey towards a balanced life and extraordinary results starts with self discovery. She has also created The Backyard, a web talk show, and written My Energy, a guide designed to provide a stepwise path to self growth. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you, Dasha. Thanks for
You're
having me.
welcome.
Are we code switching and how we say our name?
I know. That's funny you said that. I thought, did I just code switch? Did I say Rachel? And then I said Rachel the Haitian way.
So it's really unconscious sometimes, I think, this whole code switching. I really enjoyed what Kashi was saying, and what came up for me was I'm a social worker by profession. One of the things they teach you is that you meet the client where they're at. So I believe that in my profession, in my years of working in the field, I was code switching throughout the whole time because depending on who the client was, I had to meet them where they're at. I had to speak the language they were speaking so that I could communicate and ensure that they understand the message that I'm trying to provide or the information I'm sharing with them. So I think this profession, if anything, unconsciously, it encourages you to code switch so that you can better. I remember being in an emergency department speaking to clients, and the doctors are speaking all the one, explaining a medical condition using all the medical terminologies. To the client is just like looking at them like shaking their head, the patient, I should say, and realizing that I had to stop the doctor. I had to say, hey, can you give me a minute? And you may just speak to the client and asking them, are you processing what's being shared with you? Do you understand what's being said? And then I had to code switch to make sure that I broke the language down to their level of understanding, to their ability to grasp what's being shared, so that they ensure that they're getting the proper information as they get discharged or they get admitted to the hospital. So I believe that I never thought about it that way, but the more I think about it, that's what it was. I've been code switching throughout my whole career.
Interesting. You said something that you know it triggered me, and you said you had to break it down in a way for them to understand. Can you further explain that?
So again, you go to the level of it, their educational level. The language piece also comes in. What language do they speak? Is it at the time, is it the Ebonics or not? Or are they whatever background? Are they Latin? Are they Haitian? Or are they Caribbean? Wherever they come from, to understand, you pull the words, or you formulate your information in a way for them to understand at their level.
Right.
So for me, when I think about code switching, that is code switching, because I had to ensure that I'm able to reach their level of understanding, let it be in terms of education, but also language, to ensure that I'm providing the proper information to them in a way which they could actually process it and understand and really grasp the information that being brought to them.
Right.
What I said, I mean by break it.
Right. And you find it's something you're still doing at the moment, or are you being your authentic self?
I'm fully my authentic self now, especially in the work that I do today. I do believe that, having said that, I raised 2 teenagers right now, and I was watching your episode from last time, and it was just, well, I'm code switching too, raising my kids, because when you're raising children, you speak a certain way to ensure that, you're raising them a certain way. But yet, I think I'm code switching now. That teenager is almost out of my house. I'm back to me in a way that I do not have to speak this way, talk that way. We don't say that in the house. Now they have, as far as I'm concerned, they have grasped what I've been trying to teach them. And they're much older, they're extremely exposed. And so that I could fully be my authentic self in ways that my kids are also relearning who I am. Because they didn't know that side of their mother. They didn't know that side of their father, because we are raising them and we were trying to teach them what we believe is right from wrong, how to show up, how to behave, what to say, what not to say, you're thinking, all these things. And you also have to be sensitive in the way in which you deliver your message to your children, because you have to be sensitive to where they are in their growth.
It's funny you
plays a role.
Right. It's funny you said that. I met, like I do with all of you, I met with Kachi on Zoom, and we were having a conversation, and my daughter peeped in, and she literally caught me. She's like, "You just code switched." I said, "I did?" She said, "Yeah, you had no more frown lines. Your voice changed, it became softer. You said my love," or whatever it is that I called her at that time. And I literally had goosebumps. I thought, oh, could that be what it is? For me, code switching is something you do in the workspace, because, I'm a minority, and in the workspace, in my head, to code switch is to be able to adapt and to have people understand me. I can't go in there and speak in Creole. They're not going to understand what I'm say, you know? So so that's how I perceived code switching to be. And then when Kachi said, well, you just code switch, I thought, oh, that was interesting. And you're saying that you taught them in a way that, in a way that was right from wrong. So you were never really yourself.
Based on my values, or how, in the way in which we want to raise our children. So
Right.
of course, you don't, your inside voice, and you don't profanity and all these other things, your thank yous and all these other things. Or maybe if I was in a different setting with friends, I would maybe let it all loose.
Rochelle, what you're saying right now is like triggering me, because I remember learning that my mom actually cusses like a sailor after years and years of her telling us that cussing wasn't ladylike and wasn't something that we should do. I remember like overhearing like a phone call with her friends and just being like, oh, mommy.
Mortified.
Yes. And even now, like you were talking about, like their authenticity, I'm listening to myself. I think, I believe I'm this stage of my life and my career and what I do. And I also believe that the work that I do gives me the space to fully be authentic with myself. I don't necessarily, I work for myself. I'm all about self-empowerment, self-development, and owning your voice and sitting in your truth and be authentic. So I am living authenticity. And if you hear me speak right now, I'm not trying to be something more. I am who I am, and I speak proper English. I speak Ebonics. I speak Creole, and even within our own Haitian culture, there are different areas within the country that speak a different type of dialect. It's still Creole, but then the words, just like you have within the United States, you go to the South, the dialect may be different from what the Northeast is or the Midwest. So all that. But I assimilate I'm fully capable of assimilating because I understand the importance of language, the importance of culture. I'm very sensitive to that, and my aim is to make people feel comfortable at all time, but yet not compromising who I am in the process.
Right. We're going to come back to the language portion. I have something to share, but I'd love to introduce Deola. She's a user-centered design practitioner with experience working for the Cabinet Office, Government Digital Services as a user experience researcher. She currently works for Capgemini Invent as a senior consultant in the future of technology practice. Her expertise includes service design, agile project management, data analysis, strategic planning, conductive, qualitative, and quantitative user research. Deola has over 10 years of financial services experience supporting banks, insurance companies, charities, local and international corporate across multiple countries. Under her belt, she packs an MBA with specialism in design management, digital business, and strategy. She didn't stop there. In 2008, she graduated with an honors degree in social historical sciences at the anthropology from University College of London. She's also the founder of Pink Dynasty. I love that name. A community interest company established to empower talented young women from marginalized backgrounds through mentoring and leadership coaching. Thank you, Deola, for coming.
Wow, what an introduction. I need you to be my hype woman all the time. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here. It's really interesting we talk about code switching because just for me, I haven't had to be on camera in so long. So it was a bit difficult for me to kind of get accustomed to, how should I dress? Am I too forward? Am I, you know, and to me, that's code switching, because normally I have the camera off, I have a head wrap on, and I'm chilled, so I'm more comfortable. But when you're presenting yourself to an audience, especially people you're not familiar with, subconsciously you're going to code switch. You're going to try to adapt to the scenario, the setting. You want to put your best foot forward. And as you get more comfortable, I find that your true, authentic self does start to creep to the surface. Lots of people, if they don't see my name or see me in person, they automatically don't always assume that I'm Black, which is quite interesting. Like, you don't sound Black, you sound posh, you sound white. And that irritates me, because it's like, what does white sound like? And that being said, they go, oh, no, you just sound really educated. You sound like, you know, posh. You come from good background, good pedigree. And I'm like, interesting. So Black means the opposite. And funny enough, that comment doesn't come from white people. It comes from Black people. I have Black people, yeah. Black people say that to me all the time. Oh, you think you're better than us because you sound white. And it's like, listen, darling, you know, we all grew up in the UK, in London, and education's free up to the age of 18. Whether you choose to take advantage of that, that's your business. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to really call on that, because I think often or not, as Black women, we deal with discrimination because of our race and our gender, but often or not, in my experience, a lot of the discrimination and microaggressions come from Black people.
Interesting.
And that's an uncomfortable truth that I don't always like to share, but I think it's important that we do kind of hold ourselves accountable for some of the things that we do unknowingly that might cause offense, and also kind of perpetuate the stereotypes that being Black is ghetto. Being Black means you don't speak proper English. Right. But isn't that some bullshit? Like, I go in and out from slang, and I do this at work because I'm comfortable enough to know that, you know, my credentials, don't play with me. So if I want to bring the street out, I will. And if I want to be more, you know, professional and refined, I'll do that. But that's because I choose to. You're not going to make me feel uncomfortable, right? So it's very important for me to just stress that, because often or not, the conversation and the narrative is around going to the workplace, and you feel like, oh, I'm the only Black woman here, I have to be a certain way. I've never felt that way. You know, I went to a white primary school. I went to a predominantly white college twice. So for my master's and my bachelor's, the only time I've kind of been in the midst of people who were from mixed backgrounds or diversity with, let's just say, the Black education was when I was in secondary school, which is your equivalent of high school, and church. So that was the only time I was really in the midst of, let's say, the majority people there were Black, or I wasn't a minority, which was great, because it was a great time to kind of like not be seen first and foremost because of your skin. Same. And we understand the, like you said, I could kiss my teeth. I think, I can't remember who said that, but that's something we do. And we don't really, you know, we kiss our teeth when something is funny. We kiss our teeth when we're annoyed. We just kiss our teeth. But when you do that in a non-Black setting, sometimes people get offended. Like, what is that? Because they've heard someone tell them it's swearing. So they get so like, why are you swearing? So when I'm in a setting where I know I am a minority, I know that there's certain things and demeanors and phrases I can't feel, let's just say I can't bring to the forefront, because I know that they don't know the background, they don't know the culture. So it's kind of an education I'm not willing to teach as well. So it's like, okay, that's when I will code switch, and I'll be my more subdued. So I won't kiss my teeth, I'll say that was stupid or that was effed up, rather than just because they don't understand and they might think I'm swearing at them, right? So that was something I wanted to say. But also in terms of like my work, because I am spending a lot of time speaking to people and covering their pain points and frustrations and motivations, and many people have different backgrounds. education levels, even accessibility needs. Like, my empathy level has shot up through the roof, because sometimes I have to speak to people who have interpreters, because their first language is BSL, and you have to code switch, because you have to be on a level where they resonate with you and they don't feel like you're finding them foreign, or it's an uncomfortable communication for them. So your patience has to be on another level, because you have to wait for them to listen to the interpreter to communicate back to you. And in doing so, you do more signaling with your body. So you become more animated. Whereas I'm not as animated when I'm listening to people talk. Sometimes I could just be like this. Like, are you there? Like, did you freeze? But I'm just soaking it in. But when I'm speaking to someone who I know they will need those visual cues, I'm going to adapt. So I think, like Rochelle had mentioned earlier, it's important to know that code switching isn't necessarily a negative thing, especially if it's there to enable communication, conversation, and to put yourself in a position where you can actually connect with people. The time it's not good is when you feel like you have to shrink yourself or dim your light in order to fit in. That's when I'm like, okay, if I have to change my core essence, how I bring myself to a place, to a meeting, in order for people to respect me, to not make me feel less than, then I shouldn't be here.
So you're saying the environment has a lot to do with it as well.
Definitely. Your environment dictates how you present yourself, how you connect with people. My mum tells me this saying all the time: you go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And often people of color, especially women, we're not always celebrated, especially Black women, right? If I show up in my African print, my hair, sometimes I have my afro out, I'm making a statement just by being present, right? I don't even have to speak. So you kind of like know that you're going to have to navigate this room in a way that doesn't make these people feel uncomfortable or see you as a threat, which is frustrating. It's tiring. But because I'm aware that sometimes their uncomfortability isn't because they hate me as a person, it's just they just don't, it's not something they're used to seeing, right?
Right.
So I have to make sure that I don't come across like I have a chip on my shoulder. But the issue you have isn't because I'm a Black woman, or I'm not talking about the racist people. I'm just saying in general, the issue is like, you're not used to seeing a Black woman so proud of her African ancestry, her hair, her skin, and speaking in her authentic voice. You're used to us being quiet, or the monolithic stereotypes like angry Black woman, funny Black woman, the mammy, So when you see that she's multifaceted, she can switch, she can adapt, they are like, oh, cool, I like you, So not that I'm seeking their approval, but I think it's important as a professional for you to kind of gauge the room, gauge your surroundings, and act accordingly. And if you feel like this is a place where they're receptive to you, your authentic self, show up and show out. But if they're giving you the snob, you too, snob. Yeah, snob back. Don't speak.
Right. Absolutely. It's interesting, the perception that we have. And I wanted to go back to Rachel, but I want to introduce Patrice as well. I wanted to touch back on, Shar said, understanding the importance of language and culture and not compromising who we are. When we travel, and I'll come back to it, and it's the same thing Rachel was saying, your space. So when you travel and you go somewhere else, you adopt the accent of that because now it's your new environment, a new space, and it's also a way to integrate and to, have people understand you. And I think also it You know, I keep reading in Harvard Business Review about making others feel comfortable, that code switching is about also making others feel comfortable. In essence, it really is once you know what space you're in, you know? So, as a career nomad, Patrice Lindo has concentrated over a decade of diverse experience to empowering women. Through focused and purposeful coaching, she fast tracks their progress by helping them learn to effectively navigate and leverage the dynamics of white corporate spaces. She is absolutely driven by a need to fill a professional void that has often made meaningful career progress inaccessible for women of color. Like always, she's here to provide strategic resources and social capital needed to create substantial career progression. Having triumphed over these obstacles and institutional barriers, once again, she is paying her success forward by guiding the next generation of aspiring change agents by using a spiritual approach to accelerate career development. Patrice, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. This has been a dynamic conversation, and I'm just really honored to be a part of it. A lot of the work, I guess you could say, excuse me, that I have done has been in the spaces that all of us have referenced, through the lens of consulting, and not just at some of the largest companies, but in different industries. So like Rochelle had shared, it could be healthcare, for example, it could be, retail, it could be, mining or transportation, but you definitely, at least I choose and I help people to leverage the energy of the room. So as Deola said, when you're in the room, and you're met with resistance, right? Or you're met with, I think the words you used was snobbery, or, that kind of like, what are you doing here? I very much as I tend to lead, at least from the change management aspect of the work, I typically go in and I observe, right? I kind of read the room and kind of figure out who's who and what's what before I share anything, because more often than not, the rooms that I've been in, they're going to have to circle back to me, right? Regardless of how we start, they're going to end up back with me. And as she mentioned, they'll talk around you. They absolutely will. I mean, I'm cordial. I speak to everybody, whether they respond or not, right? That's just my upbringing. My family's Jamaican. And then they go to the place of, well, so who's handling the change management, for example, and who's leading that effort? And it's usually, in this case, me. And I literally use that as a point of, whether you like me or not, this is the work we're doing. So are we going to do it or not? And it's kind of like we start at that mid ground. And if we're not able to somehow find a space in the middle, I know the steps that you need to take to be able to move forward, because I'm not there to make friends in corporate spaces. However, I think code switching, as all of us have said, is something that we do in different arenas. My parents are very Jamaican, so I am a different girl at home as their daughter than when I'm yucking it up with my sister, than when I'm talking with my, newly, college bound kids, than I am when I'm hanging out with my girlfriends. That's just a part of who we were. And I think that's rooted in literally our roots, because code switching, I think, started from times of slavery, when it was a matter of safety, that you had to switch your language to live, right? You had to switch to keep your family together. You had to switch to be able to get from point A to point B. And thankfully, if you call it that, we're at a place now where we can say, this is not okay if this is coming from a racist place, or this is not okay if you're trying to minimize the work that I'm doing. This is not okay if you're taking credit for the work that I've done, and things like that. But definitely I choose to literally step on it when I see it or when I experience it, not just for myself, but for others in the room, because that's a part of at least what I consider to be my work, the impact we need to have. So if I see someone, for example, let's just say referencing somebody without kids, like, oh, you're a young Black woman with no kids. Like, how many baby daddies do you have? I've been asked that at work, 2 master's degrees and 25 years married later. But my response wasn't how long I was married. My response was, what does that have to do with the work that we're doing right now? Please share that with me. And I literally will dress them down that way, but that's my approach. So I think we all have to get to a place where we can use it to our benefit. And when it doesn't, be verbal about it. But as all of us have said, be professional about it and keep it moving, because we all are bringing a level of magic and results to the table. And a lot of times our problem that we're having in that situation can be quickly rerouted if we have the language, as we've talked about, to address it. It won't necessarily change their perspective, but they'll definitely know, don't play with that fill in the blank, because she will get you together. Because I make friends with HR. I make friends with the people that make decisions. That's who I try to figure out, who's who in the room. And so that's my spiel.
Right. So that goes back to what we were all saying, who's in the room? How are you navigating your space? And that's exactly what we're talking about every Tuesday, how women of diverse backgrounds and of color navigate race and gender in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we're navigating. Rochelle, I keep seeing you shaking your head. Do you have anything to add to, to our discussion?
I'm just taking it all in, and I'm agreeing with so much because it's so true. I think that so many of us go through these experiences not knowing how to label what's happening. Now there's a name to it, but yet in different arena in your life, you realize that you are navigating that label, which is code switching, and maybe in the workforce, in the family, in the community, wherever you are. And what came up for me also was I remember when I moved to Florida a couple of years ago, and raising my children in a predominantly white community and engaging in all these activities. One thing I did, which is a different type of code switch for me, is I wanted to always show up as my African self, my Black self, my Haitian self at all times. So
yes.
I ensured that I did. And I was not, so one could say, is it code switching? Because maybe I wasn't but I embraced it because I wanted to be the one in the room that looked different, because I was the one in the room that looked different. And my kids were the ones in the room looking different, but yet still be fully present within my values and my culture and my upbringing, not switching that piece. And this is where the authenticity comes in. It's not switching what you were born, who you were born to be, how you were raised. I mean, there may be element of how you were raised you may reject. I mean, that's part of the process of self-discovery process. But yet, overall, the essence of me is the essence of me. I will not compromise who I am for the sake of making others more comfortable. I will educate, I will learn, we will grow, but I will not compromise who I am, because I don't think it's fair. But again, it's a learning process. I think that we do it throughout course of life in experiences.
Right. Yeah. Right. Kachi, how do you feel about all of this?
Yeah, so I had a thought earlier, and then Rochelle kind of made me expand upon it a little more. Because when we were, I can't remember who was talking about it, but I think part of what makes code switching uncomfortable is this idea of right and wrong. It's saying, I'm going to be this way because this is right, and the way that I am is wrong. And I think that I took a lot of sociology courses in college, but was too lazy to commit as a second major or an. I don't know if you guys have learned about the myth of the other. This idea of we other people so that we don't have to feel bad about mistreating them. And this is something that men have done to women. It's just something that's very common. And I started thinking about non-racial code switching. So you guys have heard the Coke pop soda debate. We all know this, right? When that debate comes up, it's always in terms of this is what's right. Where I grew up, it's soda. Soda's right. If you're in the South, everything is Coke.
Oh, we lost you, Kachi. I can't hear you. You're on mute. While we're waiting for Kachi, it's interesting. Dr. Aku, she said something. She says internalized racism causes us to perpetuate these stereotypes. Right, Patrice? I see you shaking your head.
Okay, I think you guys can hear me.
I'm not saying I agree yet. I'm listening to the rest of what you're saying. I'm just taking in what you're saying. So just, it's acknowledgement, not agreement yet. I'm waiting for you to finish your thought.
Okay,
You
now
guys
I hear
hear me
you,
now?
Kachi. Yes,
Okay.
we do.
So I was just saying, like, one of the big problems is that the soda Coke pop debate. It's this idea of you're right, I'm wrong, this is the way it should be, instead of just being like, oh, you're from the South, so you say Coke for everything. You're from the Midwest, so it's pop. Cool. I'm from California, we call it soda. Like, I was just thinking about that debate because when you're talking about compromise for code switching, I always thought that was like a good thing because I grew up being told to assimilate. And to me, assimilate was an erasure. It was saying like you have to remove who you are, what you know, and transform. And there was a sense of permanence to become comfortable and acceptable within these white spaces as a Black person. So when I first learned about code switching, I always liked it because I thought it was this like subversive thing where it's like, okay, I'll create this mask and I'll wear it, but I'm still me underneath this mask, right? I'm not giving up who I am. What I'm simply doing is, for a long time playing the game. And I think that that's what it's become, that because, just in general, like we don't really like to accept that which is different. And so for a lot of this, code switching, I think one of the resentments that I got, I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the 90s, at some point, they wanted to make Ebonics an official language. I don't know if this was nationwide or just in California, but it was on the ballot. Like they were going to vote on whether or not we should allow kids to write in Ebonics, test in Ebonics, and allow teachers to teach. It was a huge debate. And ironically, it was African Americans who were the most against this. They were very against the idea of codifying Ebonics as the Black language. Like, no, you know what I mean? And so sometimes I feel like when we talk about code switching, the side that we're missing is it's not enough to just code switching, but what do we have to do to get the other side who we're code switching for to stop expecting that, to understand that like, hey, here's who we are, this is how we speak, and that's okay. Like for me, it's the otherness, this is right and this is wrong, this is acceptable and this isn't acceptable. And I think that's why now we are seeing this backlash against code switching, because people are feeling like, whoa, this isn't about me anymore, it's about making these other people feel more comfortable, which is not unlike, like Rochelle said, for in her work, that wasn't about that. It was about the fact that she cared about her patients or her clients. She needed to connect with them, and she wasn't going to be a stubborn ass and say, well, this is just the way I am. Like they, you know what I mean? Like that's selfish. It's selfish. And so what she did, it wasn't even for them as much as I want to be a good social worker. And this is what I got to do to take care of people. The same way you're not going to get on a phone call, turn around and talk to your small, child with the same tone you were just railing someone at work who messed up, because that doesn't, benefit you. And so, a big part of what I feel like has changed, unlike like Deola, I'm like, oh, she's so lucky. She had church, she had high school. I never had that. All I had were pockets. So do you know what I mean? Like I would
What
go
do
to
you mean by
school.
pockets?
So I went to Notre Dame. We had the BCAC, the Black Cultural Arts Council. We didn't even have a BSU because they never wanted to pass it or allow it, because it made people uncomfortable to have this like formulaic area for Black people to come all together. It made them uncomfortable. So we had the Black Cultural Arts Council, which I didn't like because it felt very performative. Because what we did is we put on comedy shows, we put on theater shows. Everything was about, it was more about Black entertainment.
Entertainment, right.
Yes. And so what I found was like, I worked at Facebook, another very white area. That Black at Facebook group was where I could find myself to feel not othered. But I also was acutely aware that we were about 2% of the entire
Facebook population. And then what happened is it became a place of survival instead of celebration.
Wow.
And I recognized this at some point. That's why I actually left Facebook, because I was just like, this is no place for Black people. Like, this is not, because it really was that, like, you would go into these groups and we would all, instead of just celebrating our wins, our successes as Black Facebook employees, it became like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. How am I going to survive this? How am I going to get through this? PCSs are coming. How am I going to make sure that my white manager doesn't, down level me or not give me the proper, spacing? And so I think for me, like, that's why code switching, which I never had a problem with before, has become I have a very strenuous relationship with it, as I think a lot of us do. Like, yes, it can help us. Yes, it can be a tool or even a weapon. But at the same time, if I'm not controlling when I yield that weapon, that's where I feel some of my discomfort has started to come from.
Right. So you're no longer so do you feel it's a sacrifice?
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people just don't do it anymore, because it is a sacrifice, and it's a draining sacrifice, and it's exhausting, and you kick yourself when you forget. You ever have those moments where you forget where you are, and so you say something or your neck moves in a little bit of extra way, and then you're kicking yourself because you're like, oh man, now these white people are going to be looking at me like this or talking to me like this. Like, I swear to God, I have a thing against white people who code switch and, do stuff like, hey, girlfriend, it bothers me. It truly makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, I'm not your Gina, like, no, don't do that. But from their perspective, I don't know what they think they're doing. So I don't even know how to give feedback at that point.
Deola, what would be your feedback? Oh, I think you're on mute, Deola.
Sorry.
It's all good. Technology.
I'm telling you, honestly, I can definitely see and appreciate the differences and the nuances that a Black woman will have in the UK versus the United States. As someone who has lived and worked in the UK, in both, I worked in New York for almost close to a year. I can definitely understand that. I think, is it the legacy, the historical trauma that Black people, especially Black women, have, makes that navigation more difficult. And the toll, the emotional and mental stress that comes along with not trying to be seen as a problem, but you have every right to call things out, but you don't. That was very sad to see. I didn't have to do that because I had a privilege in a sense that I had a full African name and I spoke like this. And it was interesting that my white colleagues, American white colleagues, didn't consider me Black or African American, right? They looked at me like I'm this this amazing person, like I'm related to the Queen or something. Like, they were so fascinated by me and made me feel so welcome. And obviously I enjoyed the the love, but I was fully aware that this is not how typical African American women are treated. And I knew this for a fact, because even when I would go out to the stores, shopping, I wouldn't get treated the way I was treated in the office space. But as soon as I spoke, oh my God, like, it's like the waters would part, like I was Moses. Everyone would be like, how can I help you? Oh my God, So it is really interesting that my experience with integration, assimilation, isn't as negative as it would be if I was living in the States permanently, because I feel like there's that added pressure to just you want to live life as an individual, but you're constantly being reminded of who you are, where you come from, and your history as a slave, as a N-word. Whereas, don't get me wrong, there's racism in this country, right? There's an undercurrent of racism. It's very covert, right? There's also a huge element of classism.
Yes.
Because I don't sound like a ghetto girl, Okay. Don't get it twisted. I could go there. I know how to code switch, but I generally like this. This is the way my mother raised me. She does not like when you use slang. She will slap you. Like she won't. She'll give you a warning. Like if you don't talk properly, I will give you a dirty slap. So naturally, I know that I have to pronounce my T's and speak properly. Growing up, so if I am in an environment where there are people who are, let's say, I use more slang than I do, and sometimes I don't understand what they're saying. They do look at me like I'm other, like, who are you? Who is this black girl? Like, are you really black? And that goes back to my point that often or not, the discrimination and the prejudice that I experienced living in the UK, in London, is from people that actually look like me. Because I have to explain to them why I'm not using slang. I have to explain to them why I do certain things or don't enjoy certain things, which they kind of like align with blackness. And if I don't do those things, I'm not a real black woman, which is so sad. So it's kind of like you have to battle those stereotypes in your own community. And then when you're in the office space, you have to also ensure that you don't perpetuate those stupid stereotypes that I'm here for your entertainment, or I'm here to be, that performative role of what they expect a black person to be. Oh, did you, if they're talking about music, they want to kind of bring you in. If they're talking about any form of entertainment, they want your opinion. It's like, I'm not interested in that though.
That's exactly what Kachi was saying. Kachi, you said it felt very uncomfortable it was the program, right? The program that had, theater and art and entertainment. And is that how they is that how they portray Black people? The entertainer, the funny one, right?
It's kind of like the spectrum of, you're either the really funny, quirky one, or you're just that mean, angry woman. Like,
right.
Don't go to her. She's aggressive. And it's like, I've been in contact with more angry white women than I care to think of, right? they have... They're allowed to be angry in peace. And sometimes that anger is justified, but because of the stereotype, I have to curb my enthusiasm. I have to kind of not come across as angry or aggressive, because we're winning in that field, aren't we, Black women? Like, we've got that trophy, right? So when it comes to being, let's say, I don't know, because I really hate when they say, we need to be feminine. What the hell does that mean? Like, please. But maybe like coy or passive aggressive. I've learned that from a lot of my white girlfriends. They have the art of shades that I wish I possessed. They have this way of like telling you you're stupid without you actually recognize you've just been insulted. And I'm like, we need to learn this, because then maybe if we kind of like embody that passive aggressiveness that these women have, we won't be labeled as angry. We won't be labeled as the aggressive Black woman. So I think it's like, again, if you don't mix with a diverse group of people, you're not going to learn different ways to kind of navigate life in general. So for me, I don't think integration or assimilation is a bad thing. I think when you're, they have that saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans, but that doesn't mean you lose who you are, right? So as long as your core essence, you're not kind of, you're not compromising who you are, right? You're not staying here just for a check.
Right, which is what Rochelle was saying. She was saying she needs to remain her authentic self.
Precisely. But I think this narrative that, oh no, I feel like I'm losing myself, or I'm shrinking myself, or why should I have to be a certain way? Look, this is the real world. Unfortunately, we live in the real world. Wherever you go, you're going to have to assimilate. That's just life. But you just need to strike that healthy balance of knowing that as long as this doesn't compromise my values, who I am, and I feel comfortable enough to come out and express myself in whichever way, whether you want to be your professional professional persona, or your coy persona, or your ghetto persona. We have so many personas, but as long as you're able to express yourself, your true self, it doesn't matter. So I think like, we don't need to always make this a big deal, like code switching. Everyone does it. Like I said, I have a diverse group of friends and colleagues, and they all code switch. We all do it.
Right. It's
I think it's a
interesting.
chicken or egg question here.
There's a comment here by LinkedIn user. They say, I'd like to think that ownership is the path towards lessening the code switching burden, but code switching is a communication tool. We do it automatically. For example, if you travel, which is what I was going to discuss, you are code switching in a foreign country. In the US, code switching is very much tied to race and upholding dichotomies that pit Black and white against each other. We say that Blackness is not a monolith, which is why we are doing the heavy lifting in our communities.
This is the chicken and egg argument. So what comes first? Do we need to just be our authentic selves and eventually people will become comfortable and accept it? Or does the work need to be done on the other side to be accepting first so that we can be comfortable being an authentic self? And I think that has been the question.
Go ahead, Patrice.
I was just going to say that's not an either or, that's a yes and. At least in my world, it is. It's a yes and, right? Yes, we need to be our authentic selves, but yes, they also need to do the work. You know, it's not black or white. I think it can definitely be used as a tool, but of course, each of our experiences is just that, our experience. So what does being authentic mean to you? What is offensive? When I say to you, don't get me wrong. Like Deola said, if they say the N-word, then that's offensive to everybody. Like, stop it. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. But if it's like, for me, honestly and truly, I like code switching because trust me, when me get on the phone at work, I mean, I tell them about the Ross where I go on, you know, that's stress relieving to me to be able to say what the entire fuck is happening right now. But I can't say that, but I can get on the phone with my homie and be like, yeah, if you ever see them white people are mad. I mean, that's good for me. I can go in the parking lot and do that and say, hey, mom, how's it going? Yeah, they're mad like bad boys piece. You know, that's good for me. That's good for me. That's not strenuous for me. That's like a shot of vodka. Boom, let's go get this check.
Yes.
So that's what I mean when I say it's yes and, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I can definitely thread on that. I had family that flew in from Haiti and we hung out with each other, and it was interesting because I felt such a sense of relief and I work for myself. So, but it was still a sense of relief to just exactly what you're doing. I spoke in Creole. I said things I wanted to say. You know, we were laughing loud because that's what we just do. And it was interesting because in the restaurant, we were laughing loud. It was, my aunt, her husband, myself, my spouse, and we were laughing and enjoying ourselves. And it was funny because we were no longer a minority because we were such a big group. And my cousin is the one managing the bar. And there were white people who came by and they were giving us dirty looks. And they were giving us dirty looks and saying, because there were kids there as well. It's a family-oriented restaurant. And there were kids there as well. And they were saying, this is not a daycare. Why do you think you coming here? Because you think it's a daycare as they're trailing off. And they felt uncomfortable. They thought they were making us feel uncomfortable, but they felt uncomfortable because we were loud, we were laughing, we were really enjoying ourselves and having a good time. And, there were sneers and, people were looking. So, but it's like you said, Rachel, you can understand, c'est un défoulement. You feel like, woof, my people, it feels so good. Exactly what you said, Patrice. It's like a shot of whiskey. I didn't even need to drink. I'm like, it was cathartic. It really was. But it's, again, look, Precious is saying this conversation is straight fire. Another one is saying, I had a BSU, still experienced being judged by other Black people because I was a regular admit, right? And it says we need to stop caring about these folks, somebody else says, and just focusing on ourselves. Rochelle, you keep shaking your head. Do you have anything to say? Please chime in.
No, I'm just loving it. I'm just loving the conversation. I mean, I have so much to say, but couple of things. I think awareness is one of the big things we have, one of the big tools we have. And with awareness, you educate, and I'm big on educating. For every moment that I have that could be a discomfort, like not a comfortable moment for anyone, I take that opportunity to educate others. So this is why I'm more and more comfortable with my showing up authentically, because I take each moment where there's a question, oh, why did you do this? Oh, let me help you out. Let me help you out. Let me help you understand. Even in terms of one thing that came up also, when you talk about like let's say the whites using profanity, the F word. When they use she was talking about passive aggressiveness. It sounds like, it's in some communities within the Caucasian world, they use it all the time. But it doesn't, for them, it's just water. But yet, if someone else says it, if I were to say it, it's like, oh, what happened? And it's kind of like, why is it a problem if I say it, but when you say it, it's like drinking water every day. The difference sometimes is, and that's when I remember having a moment I had to educate, is because I say with intent. Because when I use it, it's intentional. So you feel the bass of my voice when I say it, but it's no different from what you're saying. Because you say it every time you turn around, and I don't do that. But when I do it, it sounds like it's a problem. This is where it comes back to the whole angry Black woman or something. No, I just say it with bass in because I'm intentional when I am saying it. I don't use it free, So there's all these elements, but it's always, again, depending on who we're interacting with and the environment we're in, it can be a moment to educate, and it can be a moment to grow. And that's how I see each of these experiences, because it's continuous. And we're also growing. I mean, the whole code switching terminology is kind of like a new one. It's like, oh, we don't even realize we do it within our own home. Right. But I know, as you mentioned, and Patrice mentioned it as well, what I've noticed myself as well is like I'm the most comfortable within my own family. And also like, well, maybe my Haitian friends, because I'm fully 100% me, without having to be like, okay, I'm gonna go in this setting. Okay, I won't be able to speak this language. I need to make sure, like all these elements, or I have to be mindful that they may take my tone a certain way, adjusting to my tone. Now I don't do it anymore, but that's one thing you tend to do often because it's just part of living in a society.
Right. Patrice,
I just have a question for the group.
Yes.
Where did everyone learn to code switch? Who taught you to code switch? And do you feel like if you have kids that they're learning it, are you part of teaching it? Because I'm just like, why, where, how? Yes, like Patrice, I would love to hear. I'm like, where?
So I was born in New York, but my mother was from Jamaica. So from me born, she said, this is how we chat in the yard. And when we leave the house, we're, hi guys, how do you do it? And so, we did that. And then when we were around our Black friends, it was like, yo, it was just ingrained. And so what I teach my own daughters is like, yo, be who you need to be. Now put the bass in your voice. It can be Jamaican, it can be American, it can be Black, it can be white. Let them know, don't fuck around because you came here to do this work and that's it. I mean, that's, confidence is what I'm trying to build within them so that they don't feel like, I don't want them to do what I did because I did it. I want them to have their own authentic experience because the world in 2021 is different than it was in 1972. I mean, let's just be real about that, right? So Absolutely. The coyness and, the trying to be politically correct won't necessarily work to their benefit depending on what it is they need to do. Now, does that mean that, if they get stopped by the cop, that's the time to be like basing their voice and all that shit? No, but they're trying to get home alive. Hello? Right. That may be everybody's experience. So I just feel like code switching has different lenses. And so what I'm trying to teach them is how to operate at the 2,000 foot level and the 50,000 foot level and read it quickly, because sometimes it's the difference between death and life. Sometimes it's the difference between having a job and not. And sometimes it's like, yo, put your work hat down and just kick it with your girls if that's what you're doing. That's what I'm hoping that they get out of it, not necessarily to do what I'm teaching them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And and Kachi, in answering your question quickly, I'm going to thread to what she's saying. Now it's about build, and my daughter's only 6, and now it's about building her confidence. I want her to have a seat at any table, all tables. I want her to show up with her puffy hair. I want her to show up if she's got, curly hair, if it's frizzy, and she needs to know how to navigate her space, but show up as herself. That's all I want. I want Sophia to show up as herself. And she does. Yesterday we were having a conversation. We were all adults. And as in Caribbean homes, we didn't participate in a lot of adult conversations, right? Can you all shake your heads? Yeah, we didn't. So she was sitting down and she was asking a question to Jari. She was asking a question to me. Then she asked a question to Christopher. And we were that's her seat at the table. Was I told differently when I was growing up? Sometimes, but it's the culture, right? So now I want to break the mold. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I want to break the cycle. And today, like you said, it's the confidence. And if she's, going to be among her Haitian friends and she's kicking it out with like the way I did the other day, and I felt like I had my cup filled for the next 3 months until they come back from Haiti, then so be it. But she has to know who she is and rooted in her culture and show up. Every seat is going to be her seat. Every seat is going to be her seat. So
can I add one more thing with that? Because as you said that, it reminded me of something. That is how we were raised, at least I think in Black households, but for sure in Caribbean households, about children being seen and not heard. And that's another code switching too, right? African, right? That's another code switching thing too, because I know when my mom was like, children to be seen and not heard, whether it was gossip or stuff that we really needed to know, I had something to say. But by the time she saw me, I had to act like I wasn't listening to what she said, and I mean, what I'm saying is we have to unlearn those things, if that's your experience, in the workplace, right? Because those are in our blueprint, right? And so one of the things, at least, that I try to do, and this will be something that people will be like, whatever, like I let my girls curse. They can't curse at me. They can tell me the story, but don't lose your mind if they're relating something to me, or if they're talking to one another, not fighting each other. I want them to show up authentically. So that's where I agree with you 1,000%. It's more about confidence now and your level of discomfort and how you address that depending on the audience that you're in. Because I think, and this is no shade or blame to our parents, our older generations, but again, that's what they had to do at that time. So I think it's on us to do what we need to do now. Because I think even the way I show up to work now, my mom would never do that. I mean, I got a big booty. My mom's like, you need 3 pieces on, always have a jacket on, cover your booty. My mom would die if I showed up to work like this because my hair is not done. Hello. This is not done here. It needs to be pressed. No braids. It needs to be a certain color. And, when I cut my hair off at 40 enough, my mom was like, Jesus Christ, how good thing, go back to work, because if you didn't go back to the people that work. I mean, this is how she taught my mommy, cut it out. Like, I'm saying this to my mom now, but I'm saying, there's a lot of levels or lenses to code switching, right? And it's not just our language. It's things that are institutionalized. It's things that we grew up with. There's a lot of balls in the air with code switching that no one person or no two people have the same journey, but we have similarities, strong similarities, that conversations like this really are good because we just don't realize it. At least I know I felt like I was the only one, or like my best friend that also had a crazy Jamaican mom was the only one, until you get to work and you're one of two and you're like, yo, these people are crazy. Hopefully, y'all can vibe like that. But, it's good to have these conversations and keep having these conversations because we're not alone.
Absolutely. Deola, how did you feel about it?
So I think it's about understanding rules of engagement. So you mentioned who taught us to code switch? Where did that come from? And I think what I can agree on is that I'm a child of an immigrant. So her culture back in Nigeria was completely different to the culture she was exposed to in the UK. So in order for her to survive, like I think Patrice mentioned, you do have to be politically correct. You do have to come into a room being fully aware that some of these people may not like you because of what you look like, not because of anything else. They don't know you, but you look different. So in order to ensure that you're not given a hard or difficult time, you are going to have to present yourself in a certain way. You are going to have to integrate. You're going to have to sometimes try to be extra nice, nicer than usual, because you don't want problems. It's kind of like, I have to survive, I have to get paid, I have to do my job, go home, look after my family. Whereas my experience, I feel like just part of education and nurture, you're taught that when you're speaking, you communicate, you try to communicate properly. Make sure that you're not only visible, so you want to be seen, but you want to be heard. How are you going to be heard if you can't communicate? So you need to learn how to communicate. And sometimes when you are throwing in some, colloquialisms, slang, swear words, your message is not received. Okay, and that's just the honest truth. Depending on your audience, they're not going to be as receptive to the way you present yourself so casually, which may be okay in a different setting, but it's about understanding the rules of engagement. And I think we all subconsciously, irrespective of our race, irrespective of our gender, faith, creed, whatever, we all are fully aware, well, I hope we are, that depending on where we are, whatever environments we're in, we need to be fully aware that certain things aren't going to fly. Even the way you present yourself, the way you dress. Like, I am very petite. I have a busty chest. So I know when I'm in the office, if I want to be taken seriously, respected, I'm going to button up. It's so uncomfortable too, because it's so difficult to find clothing that fits, that doesn't make you feel restrictive. But I know that we know how a lot of men are, right? Conversation with your eyes, So I will have to present myself in a different way so that I am respected as a woman, as a Black woman, and they're listening to what I'm saying and they're not just looking at my boobies, right? Whereas if I'm at home, girl, I'm not even wearing a bra. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm just free because no one's judging me and I don't have to worry about someone eyeing me up. Similarly, if I'm speaking to my colleagues, if I'm speaking to my core team, of which I'm the only Black woman, I'm speaking the way I'm speaking to you guys because we're familiar with each other. We understand one another. But if I have to do a show and tell, if I have to speak to stakeholders, I'm not speaking as comfortably because they don't know me. And I don't want them to think that me and them have that rapport, that you can get familiar with me, So it's kind of like understanding the rules of engagement, when to and when not to present a different persona. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, like I said, I keep stressing this. The only time it becomes an issue is when you start to compromise on your core values, your essence. When you start to diminish yourself, when you start to dim your light in order to make other people feel comfortable. And I would like to disagree with the fact that we need to educate white people. You do not. I'm not an educator. I'm not a professor. I didn't go to university to get a degree in teaching people. Take that. They need to take onus of their lack of understanding and ignorance of certain things and educate themselves. Because let's not get it twisted. We are a marginalized group, but they know how to treat LGBTQI community, right? So they know there's certain things they can't say, or they have to have certain levels of political correctness when engaging with that community so that it doesn't cause offense. But they don't give Black people that same respect often, because I feel we also don't enforce it. There are no repercussions for when white people disrespect us. For example, I don't even want to bring this up, but let's just talk about the baby, right? I loved how sponsorships dropped. People were dropping him like he's nonsense. But he has been disrespecting Black women and even Black men for so long, but we haven't stopped giving him our money. We haven't stopped presenting him to the world like this is a great artist, like we love him. Whereas when you cross a certain marginalized group, there are repercussions for that. We need to do the same thing. We need to be empowered and emboldened to know that if we aren't treated with the respect that we deserve, there are consequences for that. But because of the history, because of the legacy, we aren't as confident to do that. But I think we need to now, with the younger generation, they're not playing any games. They will call you out if they feel disrespected. They will call you out if they feel that you're disregarding what they have to say because of their background, because of their race, because of their age. I think we need to kind of set the tone as well and follow their leads, which is so strange that we're following the younger generation, but we do need to kind of like, they've got it right. So you can be your authentic self. You could be your authentic self in a professional setting, but it has to be a way that you are resonating with that audience, because they're not going to always understand where you're coming from if you start throwing in ebonics, or, if I speak with an African accent, they may not understand me, and that's fair. That doesn't mean that it's racist. They just don't understand. You don't understand what you're not familiar with. If they want to learn and embrace a culture that's different to them, they will, because they do that all the time. My colleagues, my friends, when they travel, they want to immerse themselves in the culture. But it's always interesting that when it comes to the Black community, that's something that, I'm not really that interested in unless it's for my entertainment. Like if they want to talk about rap music or, some stupid stereotypical character on the TV, they'll be like, hey girl, or everything is on fleek or slay or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I don't use those words.
Yeah.
But they won't do that with, say, a European or an Asian, because for some reason there's like a hierarchy, right? And we're at the bottom of that totem pole. But we need to command respect. And the only way you're going to get that is if you respect yourself. So like I say, come into the room with your authentic self, be present, be active, be visible. And when it's your turn to speak, make sure you speak and you are heard and you speak with intention. And if you want to put a little, seasoning on it, do so. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of your personality, but there's a time and place for everything. And I think everybody has to learn those rules of engagement.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's a great takeaway. Everybody has to learn those rules of engagement. So my keynote is that while I tried to limit my own bias as much as possible by interviewing only women whom I did not know and sticking to the same set of questions for ongoing interviews, it was impossible to completely remove my own personal experiences from this discussion, or from all discussions. So without it, I would have not been able to undertake it in the first place. The continual theme surfaced is that if true equality in the workplace is what we're after, sooner or later, we will have to tackle the issues that are distinctive to us. It's exactly what Deola was saying. Take command, show up, be yourself, demand the respect. Only when you respect yourself, right? So, and especially in the workplace, we need to recognize we're not alone. I know many of us are having transparent and courageous dialogues with the people around you and trying to figure out how you feel about this conversation. You must ponder that change starts with us. How you resolve these questions will be distinctive to you as women of color and of diverse backgrounds. This will reflect your personal and professional experiences through your own community and workspaces. What is essential is that you do answer these questions. We also talked about a little bit about dimming your light. Thank you for all mentioning it. And it's something that it's constantly ongoing in our talks. Go through the process of reflecting. Post your comments on LinkedIn. What's crucial is that you go through that process. And while enough of us can do just that, over time, we will continue having a united front. Transparency and authenticity is the key. We need to be true to ourselves. We can fundamentally create that transformation. Take your drawbacks, turn it around into something others find valuable. Give yourselves grace. We must keep having these courageous conversations about DEI, where these dialogues will take us. At least we're here to have these discussions. They're courageous, they're transparent, and they're authentic. We are here to help and share. Thank you so much again for listening and tuning in. This has been an epic moment, and I think the longest live that we have done. It's an hour and 25 minutes, but the conversation was flowing. We couldn't stop. I didn't want to ever stop, interrupt or stop you. So have you ever code switched was our discussion. Ladies, it was such a pleasure and an honor to have these beautiful queens on the panel. You can unmute yourselves.
Thank you. I think I'm going to go to work and ask people if they've noticed me code switching. That's going to be my lesson for the week. And also it'll be interesting to see what they think is code switching versus what my authentic self is. But I think that that's going to be my mission, because maybe if they never know, they never see it. I want people to invite me to be my authentic self, and they can't do that if they don't know that I'm working with this code switching tool, which I think a lot of people don't. So I think that's one of the lessons I've taken from everyone here. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Your takeaway, Gachelle?
My takeaway is to continue the conversation. It's a conversation that's needed throughout every culture, every background, every home. So I will start at my house to continue that as I take it out to other communities and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Patrice?
I think it's important to do the inner work, as Kashi had mentioned. Where does this all begin? And as long as you are, I don't know if I'd say at peace, but the origins, and when it's making you uncomfortable, when it's unacceptable, when it's disrespectful, and you're calling that out, then fine. But also, as Rochelle had said, turn them into opportunities wherever possible. And that doesn't mean, an 8-hour class. It means cut it out with the BS if they're talking to you crazy or treating you crazy. But it also can mean, for people that are truly interested, like, okay, this is why touching my hair is offensive, or this is why, hey girl, when, we're at work is not appropriate, just showing up in a way that is as least resistant for you as possible. And it gives yourself grace and ease wherever you are.
Absolutely. Your takeaway, Deola?
Without sounding like a parrot and repeating what everyone else has said, honestly, it's just been enjoyable to have this conversation. I think what I enjoyed was I started off a bit nervous, but because we've all been our authentic selves, it's flown so well. It's been so enjoyable, and it's interesting to get the different perspectives. Like, as I said, your experience living in the States is somewhat different to mine. But it was nice to kind of understand and have empathy for how sometimes code switching is uncomfortable and it's a burden for you over there. So that was something I'm definitely going to take into consideration a bit more. But honestly, thank you so much for having us. And me personally, I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.